So by way of parable, today the Lord gives us a brief instruction on the virtue of humility. And what he reveals to us is that there are more or less two aspects to humility. On the one side, humility can be an interior disposition, doing as St. Paul said, to consider other people as being more important than ourselves. But then there's also kind of an exterior form of humility. And that would have to do with two things. One can be the way we project ourselves, but it can also do with the circumstances of our life. This is why we would call somebody who lives in poverty, to say it politely, that their circumstances are humble because they are truly, literally, materially poor and of lowly estate. And so we kind of see both of these in play in the parable. And so he talks about someone who would presume to enter into a wedding banquet, and so full of himself and projecting so much of his own sense of self-importance, makes a beeline for the head table to have a seat. Only to have, if we're talking about a wedding banquet, the father of the bride come over and say, pardon me, that seat is reserved. And you'd presumably have to get up and then find that the only place left to sit is in the far back corner at a table where nobody else is sitting. But when we look at humility, we do have to examine the person of Jesus Christ, because he never instructs, commands, or counsels us to do anything that he himself has not first done. Learn from me, Jesus Christ once said, for I am meek and humble of heart. So let's consider God. There's nothing lowly about his state, because the scriptures tell us that even the heavens, all the things that God has created, proclaim his glory. His fame is not concealed. God is great. And you know what else? God also knows he's great. And he's not shy about making this known. We have been informed. He knows all things. He can do all things. And there is no shame in that, because it has the benefit of being true. But what Jesus is doing is drawing our attention to the interior disposition of God. Learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart. And it is utterly astonishing to consider that the great God who made all things places himself at the service of creation. And more specifically, places himself at our service. We who are nothing more than dust and ashes. If you're not convinced, then we have to go back to the night before Jesus Christ died, where we see him seated with his disciples for supper. And when the supper was ended, we're told that Jesus got up and he stripped off his outer garments and wrapped a towel around his waist and filled a basin with water and proceeded one by one to wash the feet of the disciples. And when he was done, he put back on his garments and sat down and began to teach. You call me master and teacher. And he says, good, because that is what I am. You call me Lord. Good, because that is what I am. And he says, if I, who am your master, your teacher, your Lord, the God who made you, washed your feet, how much more then should you wash one another's? This was not lost on St. Paul. In his letter to the Philippians, he tells us that though Jesus was in the form of God, he did not grasp equality with God. Rather, he humbled himself and took the form of a slave. It's remarkable. But this is the truth about who God really is. My goodness, how proud we are. Proud dust, right? Proud dust. But I think we also cannot avoid looking at the example of the Blessed Virgin Mary and see the way in which she embodies these truths. When she's at home in prayer, and the Archangel Gabriel comes to her and greets her with the salutation, "Hail, full of grace." And what are we told? That Mary was greatly troubled and wondered, what kind of greeting is this? I mean, we're told that specifically. She was troubled by the nature of the greeting. Why? Because she, who considered herself nobody, was saluted by an archangel as being somebody. It simply not only tells us about the interior disposition of the Blessed Virgin Mary, but she also admits to the lowliness of her estate. Because before the Archangel Gabriel left her presence, he announced to her also that her elderly cousin Elizabeth, beyond the years of childbearing, was now pregnant and in her 6th month. And so once the archangel departed, we're told Mary made haste. And she went to the town where her cousin lived. And after exchanging their greetings, Mary erupted in a canticle of praise. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on his lowly servant. But the word for lowly in this context carries with it the nuance of circumstance. Mary was poor. Mary was unknown. Mary was unnoticed. She was poor, interiorly and exteriorly. She considered herself to be nothing, and the world didn't even know she existed, and was utterly unnoticed by her. Two very beautiful examples. But then you're probably wondering, well, at some point we're going to have to bring up Aristotle, right? You were thinking that would be the logical outcome, because of course we'd have to talk about Aristotle and his ethics, because we need to kind of zero in now into how the church has received the teaching and the example of Jesus Christ and the Blessed Virgin Mary, and how that has been distilled and developed, and how we understand the way this virtue operates. So for Aristotle, if you recall, he always saw virtue as being in the middle of two extremes. And so virtue for him would be the golden mean. And so it's like avoid the extremes, identify the extremes, and then it will become clear what the middle path is. And to walk that middle path, if you want to live a virtuous, happy, flourishing life. But Aristotle never treated humility in the way in which we understand humility today. But nonetheless, he certainly had a concept of it. But what he noticed was that there were two extremes that he would see people fall into. And one of the extremes was vanity and great pride, this exaggerated sense of self, and that person's own sense of self-importance. Today we would call those people narcissists or me monsters, because it doesn't, no matter what, everything and everyone is all about them. Me, me, me. And they're insufferable. And they're tiring. And no one likes to be around them because of their exaggerated sense of self-importance. And what happens is that they are so caved in on themselves that they only live in this delusional world of their own self-importance and are completely blind to reality. Then on the other hand, you have people that are pusillanimous. I've been a priest for 28 years, and that's the first time I ever got to say pusillanimous in a homily. I've been looking forward to this day. You know the word, because it's found in the writings of the saints and in devotional literature. But it's that word that every time you see it, you go, oh, for heaven's sake, how do you pronounce this? And what does it even mean? But a person who is pusillanimous is someone who's cowardly. And they're so uncertain of themselves that they avoid and they shrink from every difficulty and every adversity. These are the two extremes. And so what does Aristotle propose is what he calls great souledness. To have a great soul. A person with a great soul has a very realistic knowledge of themselves. They know what they're good at. They know what their shortcomings are. And they're confident. How often does confidence get confused with arrogance? But you know, if you ask somebody to do something or to help you with some task and they say, you know, I'm not really the one you should be talking to. I'm not good at that. Well, they're being honest. And we can always appreciate that, can't we? But then, my goodness, someone comes along and says, can I offer you some assistance? I have knowledge and experience that I can use to help you in your project. And we find that confidence sometimes off-putting and is a sign of arrogance when they're simply telling the truth. Hey, I'm good at this. Why be ashamed? It's always to have this, appropriate, realistic knowledge of yourself. And this is how it kind of folds nicely, into the Catholic tradition. Because at the end of the day, what is humility? Because we can talk about it all day long. But all we would be doing is citing examples. Well, would this be humble? Would that be humble? On and on and on and on. So what is it? You'll be surprised to know that it's a one-word definition. Truth. Humility equals truth. It really is that simple. What is the truth about God? Telling the truth about God. What is the truth about ourselves? Tell that truth. Live that truth. But it also tells us the truth about one another and who we are as a human family. There is the God who made us. We are dust. Everything we possess, interior, exterior goods, all the gifts we possess, natural gifts of grace, are just that. They're gifts. And we are not ashamed, but we tell the truth. But then that truth also includes that we're not alone, are we? That we are one family. There is a race that God created in His image and likeness and invites all to call Him our Father.